Hello everyone, and it's Alex back with another fun campfire story. We're switching it up a bit today. For our campfire story today, we're going to talk about Hansel and Gretel. Now, before we do start getting into the stories and the fun details, I do want to give trigger warnings for some of the topics that are touched on in these stories. There's topics like child abandonment, cannibalism, enslavement, and murder. Now, here we go with our campfire story. Yeah. And now we have our campfire for our campfire stories. Now to the actual story of Hansel and Gretel. The story is part of a collection of fairy tales that the Brothers Grimm collected, and interestingly enough, a lot of the stories in the Grimm's fairy tale books now are not as gruesome as they used to be. The original stories were published in 1982. Oh my god. 1812. They were published in 1812. And the stories were republished in several editions thereafter. And as the Brothers Grimm started to realize that their stories were actually being read by children, their story started to become more child-friendly. I actually have a book of the Grimm's fairy tales, and that's actually kind of where the inspiration of doing this video kind of came from. The story itself starts off in a little house nearby a very large forest, where a woodcutter and his wife are living, and with his two children. And these kids were Hansel and Gretel. The family was always very poor and had very little to live on. So when the famine swept over the land, it was very hard for the family to procure daily bread. One night, while they lay in bed, the father lays there worrying over their troubles and asks his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children when we have nothing to feed ourselves?" His wife looks at him and says, "I'll tell you what, husband. Tomorrow morning we will take the children out quite early into the thickest part of the forest. We will light a fire and give them each a piece of bread. Then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They won't be able to find their way back, and so we shall be rid of them." Now, the father at first was very against this idea. He hated the idea of leaving the children, but his wife kept insisting and nagging, and he finally gave in to the idea. Little did they know, both Hansel and Gretel were listening to their conversation. Gretel was terribly upset and scared, but Hansel reassured her that it will be all right and God would not forsake them. So Hansel goes out into the yard and grabbed shiny white rocks that looked like new coins in the moonlight. He grabbed as many as he could in his pockets, and then the kids went to sleep. The next morning, their stepmother starts to scream at them, trying to get their lazy butts out of bed and their lazy children and all that kind of stuff. And they were going out to, and she told them that they were going to go out into the woods and cut some wood. She then gave them each a piece of bread and said, "This is something for you for dinner, but don't eat it before then, for you'll get no more." Gretel put both of the breads in her pocket, since Hansel's were full of stones. When they walked a little ways, Hansel stopped and looked back at the cottage, and he did the same thing again and again. His father looked back and said, "Hansel, what are you stopping and looking back at? Take care and put your best foot forward." "Oh, father," he said, I'm looking at the white cat sitting on the roof, wanting to say goodbye to me." "Little fool, that is no cat. It's the morning sun shining on the chimney," said the stepmother. But Hansel wasn't looking at a cat. He was dropping stones on the ground each time he stopped. Once they reached the middle of the forest, the father had the children gather some wood to make a fire. Once they made the fire, and the stepmother told them to rest by the fire while they worked, and they would come back and get them when they finished. Once dinner time had came, the children ate their bread and thought their father was close by because they could hear the sound of an axe, but it wasn't actually an axe. It was a dead tree that was tied to another tree that kept hitting it and kind of made the sound of an axe almost. They sat there for so long that they grew tired and ended up falling asleep. Once they woke up, it was dark out, and Gretel began to cry, wondering how they would ever get out of the woods. But Hansel reassured her and told her to wait until the moon came out, and then they would find their way back home. And sure enough, once the moon rose, the stones he laid glue like brand new money on the ground. So Hansel took his sister's hand, and they walked themselves back to the house. Once they knocked on the door, the stepmother answered with such a shock, then yelled at the kids, saying she was worried that they would never return. The father was delighted that they were home safe, for he hated the thought of leaving them behind. But not long afterwards, another great famine took the land. And again, the children heard the woman talking at night in bed to their father, saying, "We have eaten up everything again but a half a loaf, and then the children must go away. We will take them further into the forest so that they won't be able to find their way back. There is nothing else to be done." And again, the father reluctantly agrees after she consistently complains. And again, the children were awake when they heard the conversation. Hansel once again tried to go out and get more petals, but realized the woman locked the door and they couldn't get out to get more pebbles. Hansel consoled his sister, telling her not to worry and just to go to sleep, and that God will help them. And again, early in the morning, the woman made the children get up and gave them a piece of bread. This time, it was smaller than the last. On the way through the forest, Hansel would stop every now and then and throw a crumb on the ground. "Hansel, what are you stopping and to look about you for?" God, this wording sucks in this book. "Stopping to look about you for?" the father asked. "I am looking at my dove, which is sitting on a rock on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me," Hansel answered. "Little fool," the woman called. "That is no dove, it is the morning sun shining on the chimney." Nevertheless, Hansel strewed crumbs from time to time on the ground. The woman led the children far into the forest, where they have never been, and again they made a fire and told the children to stay while they cut wood, and in the evening they would come back for them. Once dinner came, Gretel shared her bread and with Hansel, since he used up all of his to leave a trail. Again they fell asleep, and again it was dark when they woke up. But Hansel reassured his sister that once the moon rose, it will shine on the bread, and they will find their way home. But once the moon rose, they could not find any breadcrumbs, for all the birds in the forest had picked them up and eaten them. But Hansel assured his sister that they would find a way, but they couldn't find it. They walked the whole night and all of the next day, from morning until night, but they couldn't get out of the woods. Their legs were tired from walking, and they couldn't go any further, so they laid down underneath a tree for the night. And on the third day, they started to walk again. By midday, they found a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on top of a tree. It sang so beautifully that they stood still to listen to it. When it stopped singing, it fluttered its wings and flew around them. They followed it and went until it came to a little cottage where it settled on the roof. When they got closer, they noticed the house was made of bread and roofed with cake. The windows were transparent with sugar. "Here is something for us," said Hansel. They both started to consume parts of the house. Hansel broke off a piece of the roof to see what it tasted like. Gretel went to the window and nibbled at it. Then they heard a gentle voice calling from within, "Nibbling, nibbling like a mouse, who's nibbling at my house?" The children answered, the wind doth blow from heaven to earth below," and then went on eating without disturbing themselves. Hansel, who found the roof particularly delicious, broke off a large piece for himself and sat down on the ground. Gretel pushed a whole round pane out of the window and sat down next to him to enjoy it. Then the door opened and a very, very old woman supporting herself with a cane came hobbling out. Hansel and Gretel were frightened so frightened that they dropped what they were eating. The old woman shook her head and said, "Ah, dear children, who brought you here? Come in and stay with me. You will come to no harm." She took them by the hand and led them into the little house. A huge dinner was laid out in front of them. There were pancakes and sugar and milk and apples and nuts. She showed them to 2 little white beds in the corner, into which they crawled and felt like they were in heaven. Although the woman appeared so friendly, she was really a wicked old witch who was on the watch for children and had built a house of sweets to lure them in. Whenever she got her hands on a child, she cooked them up and ate them. Witches have red eyes and can't see very far, but their noses are very good and can smell humans when they approach. Once the kids were asleep, she laughed wickedly to herself. Now that they were hers, she would not let them escape. The witch got up early in the morning, before the children were awake, and when she saw them sleeping with their beautiful rosy cheeks, she murmured to herself, "They will be dainty morsels." She seized Hansel with her bony hand and carried him off to a stable where she locked him up behind a barred door. The witch took no notice as he screamed and cried for help. The witch then woke up Gretel. "Get up, lazy bones. Fetch some water and cook something nice for your brother." Funny enough, it's the same thing her mother said. "He is in the stable and has to be fattened. When he is nice and fat, I will eat him." Gretel began to cry, but did as she was told in fear that she would face the same fate as her brother. Hansel was given a huge, wonderful feast, while Gretel got nothing but the shells of crayfish. And every morning the old woman hobbled over to the stable to feel Hansel's finger to see if he was getting any fatter. And clever Hansel stuck out a knuckle bone, and the woman whose eyes were too dim to see thought it was his finger, and she was much astonished that he did not get fat. And 4 weeks had passed and Hansel didn't gain any weight. The old woman became very impatient and couldn't wait any longer. So the old woman decided that the next day, whether he was skinny or fat, she would eat Hansel. She yelled for Gretel to fetch a pail of water for tomorrow, and as she did, she cried for her brother. She cried, "If only the wild animals in the forest had eaten us up, we should have at least died together." And the old woman told her to spare her lamentations, for they would not help her. And early in the morning, Gretel filled the kettle with water. She then kindled a fire and put the kettle over the fire. "We will bake first," said the old woman. "I have heated the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed Gretel towards the oven and said, "Creep in and see if it's properly heated, and then we will put in the bread." What the old woman meant was that when Gretel had gone in, she would shut the door and roast her. But Gretel saw her intention and said, "I don't know how to get in. How am I to manage?" "Stupid goose," the witch cried. "The opening is big enough. You can see that I could get into it myself." She hobbled up and stuck her head into the oven, but Gretel gave her a push, which sent the witch right in, and she banged the door and bolted it shut. The witch began to howl a horrible, horrible scream, but Gretel ran away and left the wicked witch to perish miserably. Gretel ran as fast as she could to the stable to free her brother, crying out, "Hansel, we are saved! The old witch is dead." Hansel sprang out of the cage like a bird. How delighted they both were! They hugged each other and danced for joy. Since they had nothing more to worry about, they went back into the house and searched through every crevice of the witch's home. And they found chests of pearls and precious stones. Hansel filled his pockets, saying, "These are better than pebbles." And Gretel too filled her apron with jewels. They soon left, but came across a great big piece of water. "We can't get across it," said Hansel. "I see no stepping stones and no bridge." "And no boats either," Gretel answered. "But there is a duck swimming. It will help us over if we ask it." So she cried, "The little duck that cries quack quack, here Gretel and Hansel stand. Quickly take us on your back, no path nor bridge is there at hand." The duck came swimming towards them, and Hansel got on its back and told his sister to sit on his knee. "No," Gretel said. "It will be too heavy for the duck. It must take us over one after the other." The good creature did this, and once they were safely across, Hansel and Gretel were in a familiar part of the forest, and at last they saw their father's cottage. Once they saw it, they began to run towards the house and then wrapped their arms around their father's neck in pure joy. The man had not seen a single happy moment since he left his children in the wood, and in the meantime his wife died. Gretel shook her apron, and Hansel emptied his pockets of jewels and stones, and all their problems came to an end, and they lived together as happily as possible. That was a wild ride. If you think about it, like, this story is just mind-blowing and, like, so screwed up. Like, these poor kids need, like, copious amounts of therapy. They were with that witch for like damn near a whole month before they got out. A whole month of just that, of just not knowing if they were going to die or not. It was insane. It's stories like this that I don't understand how it's a kid's story. It's just so dark. And to think this is the watered down version. And I bet you're wondering, if this was so screwed up, how messed up is the original? And well, I found something as close as I can get to the original. It was a story that was published also by the Grimm brothers. The Brothers Grimm, sorry, and it has a lot of parallels to Hansel and Gretel, and the story is called The Juniper Tree. There are many stories that are very similar to the juniper tree, that come from like different regions. One of them is the story of the little boy and the wicked stepmother, and I'll come back to that story later. But the juniper tree starts a very long time ago. I think it's funny because this is how it actually starts. And it's just like in a faraway land a long time ago. Like how they all start. It starts a very long time ago. There was a rich man who had a beautiful and devoutly religious wife, and they loved each other dearly. But for whatever reason, they couldn't have a child of their own, though the woman prayed for days and days for them to have a child of their own, but they didn't get any. In front of their house was this gorgeous juniper tree, and one day in the winter, the woman was standing beneath it, peeling herself an apple. While she was peeling, she cut her finger, and blood fell into the snow. "Oh," said the woman. She sighed heavily, looking at the blood before her. "If only I had a child as red as blood and as white as snow." And she said that she became quite content and felt sure that it was going to happen, and she goes back to the house. I don't know what that means, by the way. Red is blood? The white is snow I kind of get, but red is blood? I don't know. It's an old story, so there's probably a bunch of it that I don't understand. Then a month goes by, and the snow was gone. 2 months, and everything was green. 3 months, and all the flowers came out of the earth. 4 months, and all the trees in the woods grew thicker, and the branches were all entwined in one another, and birds sang until the woods resounded, and the blossoms fell from the trees. The 5th month passed, and she stood beneath the juniper tree, which smelled so sweet her heart jumped for joy, and she fell on her knees and was beside herself. When the 6th month was over, the fruit was thick and large, and then she was quite still. After 7 months, she picked up the juniper berries and ate them greedily. Then she grew sick and sorrowful. Then the 8th month passed, and she called her husband to her and cried, "If I die, then bury me beneath this juniper tree." Then she was quite comforted by the fact, and happy until the next month was over, and then she had a child as white as snow and as red as blood. And when she saw it, she was so happy. Then she died. I was gonna say that she died, but she did not die because she loved her child so much. Her husband did as she wished, and buried her beneath the juniper tree. He cried bitterly for a very long time, and after some time he took another wife, and he had a daughter with his second wife. When the woman looked at her daughter, she loved her very much, but she looked at the little boy, and it pierced her heart for the thought that he would always stand in her way. And she was also always thinking how she could get the entire inheritance for her daughter. Then the evil one filled her mind with this until she grew very angry at the little boy. So much so that she started to slap him here and cuffed him there, until the poor boy was always afraid. There was no peace that he could find when he came home from school. One day, the woman went upstairs with her daughter, and her daughter asked for an apple. And she said, "Yes, my child." The woman gave her an apple out of the chest, and the chest had a very heavy lid with a sharp iron lock. The girl asked her mother if her brother was going to get one as well. Then the woman became very angry at this, and she said, "Yes, when he comes home from school." From the window, she saw him coming home. Once again, the evil one came over her, and she grabbed the apple from her daughter, saying, "You shall not have one before your brother." She threw the apple into the chest and shut it. Then the little boy came in, and the evil one made her say to him kindly, "My son, do you want an apple?" And she looked at him fiercely. "Mother," said the boy, "how angry you look. Yes, give me an apple." "Come with me," she said, opening the lid of the chest, taking out an apple for herself. And while the little boy was leaning over, the evil one prompted her, and she slammed the lid down, and his head flew off amongst the red apples. Fear overcame her. I wonder why. And she thought how she was going to get out of this. So when she went upstairs to her room and grabbed a white scarf out of the top drawer and set the head on the neck again, tying the scarf around it so that nothing could be seen. Then she set him on a chair in front of the door and put an apple in his hand. After this, Marlene, his sister, came into the kitchen to her mother, who was standing by the fire with a pot of hot water that she was stirring. Just hot water. She told her mother, "Brother is sitting at the door, and he looks totally white and has an apple in his hand. I asked him to give me the apple, but he did not answer me, and I was very frightened." Her mother told her to go back to him, and if he did not answer, to box his ears. She did, and so she did. And after her brother did not answer, she did as her mother instructed and hit him on the ear, making his head fall off. Marlene was terrified and began screaming and crying and ran to her mother. And her mother comforted her, but she could not be comforted and rightly so. This mother is just horrible because she kills the son and makes her daughter think that she's the one that killed him. Anyway, it gets worse, though. It gets worse. The mother leaned down to the daughter, saying, "Marlene, what have you done? Be quiet and don't let anyone know about it. It cannot be helped now. We can cook him into the stew." Then the mother took the little boy and chopped him up into pieces and put him in the pot and cooked him into stew. Marlene stood by the pot, crying her eyes out, and all of the tears fell into the pot. There was no need to add salt. The father had come home and sat down at the table and asked where his son was. The mother just served up a large dish of stew, and Marlene could not stop crying. The father once again asked where his son was, and the mother shrugged it off and said that he had gone across country to his mother's great uncle, and he was going to stay there for a while. And he said, what is he doing there? He didn't even say goodbye to me. Oh, he wanted to go and ask me if he could stay 6 weeks. He'll be taken care of there. No need to worry. Oh, the father said unhappily. It isn't right that he didn't say goodbye to me. Then he began to eat and turned to Marlene. Marlene, why are you crying? Your brother will certainly come back. And then he said, Wife, this food is delicious. Please give me some more. And the more he ate, the more he wanted. And he just ate and ate and ate, throwing all the bones under the table when he was finished, until he was all finished. Marlene went into her chest of drawers and took out her best silk scarf from the bottom of the drawer and gathered up all the bones from beneath the table and tied them up into her silk scarf, then carried them outside the door. She laid them down beneath the juniper tree on the green grass, and after she put them there, she suddenly felt better and didn't cry anymore. Then the juniper tree began to move. The branches moved apart, then moved together again, almost as if someone was rejoicing in clapping their hands. At the same time, the mist rolled in and seemed to rise from the tree, and in the center of the mist, it burned like a fire. And in it, a beautiful bird flew out, singing a magnificently beautiful song. And it flew high into the air, and when it was gone, the juniper tree was just as it was before, and the cloth with the bones was nowhere to be found. Marlene, however, was as happy and content as if her brother was still alive, and went merrily into the house and sat down at the table to eat. The bird flew to the goldsmith's house and began to sing. My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I. The goldsmith was sitting at his workshop making a golden chain when he heard the bird sitting on his roof and singing. Sorry. The song seemed so beautiful to him. He got up, still wearing his leather apron and his golden chain and tongs in his hands. He walked over to the bird and said, How beautifully you can sing. Sing that piece for me again. And the bird said, No, I do not sing twice for nothing. Give me the golden chain, and then I will sing it for you again. The goldsmith obliged. Here's the golden chain for you. Now sing that song for me again. The bird came and took the golden chain in its right claw and sat in front of the goldsmith and sang. My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I. I'm going to end up remembering those by the end of this video. And the bird flew away to the shoemaker and sat atop his roof and sang, My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I. Hearing this, the shoemaker ran out and looked up at his roof and had to hold his hand in front of his eyes to keep the sun from blinding him. Bird, he said, how beautifully you can sing. He called in at his door, Wife, come outside. There's a bird out here. He can certainly sing. Then he called his daughter and her children and the journeyman and the apprentice and the maid, and they all came out into the street and looked at the bird and saw just how beautiful it was, with its fine red and green feathers, and how its neck was like pure gold, and how its eyes shone like stars. "Bird," said the shoemaker, "now sing that song again for me." "No," said the bird. "I do not sing twice for nothing. You must give me something." "Wife," said the man, "go to the shop. There is a pair of red shoes on the top shelf. Bring them down." Then the wife went and brought the shoes. The bird then came and took the shoes in his left claw and flew back onto the roof and sang. "My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I." When he had finished his song, he flew away with the chain in his left right claw and the shoes in his left. He flew far away to the mill, and the mill went clickety clackety, clickety clackety, clickety clackety. In the mill sat 20 millers, apprentices, cutting stone and chiseling. Chop, chop, chop. Oh, chip, chop, chip, chop, chip, chop. Then the bird went and sat on the linden tree, which stood in front of the mill, and sang. "My mother, she killed me. One of them stopped working. My father, he ate me. Then 2 more stopped working and listened. My sister Marlene. Then 4 more stopped. Gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf. Now only 8 were left chiseling. Laid them beneath. Now only 5. The juniper tree. Now only 1. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I." The last one stopped and said, "Bird, how beautifully you sing. Let me hear that too. Sing it once more for me." "No," said the bird. "I do not sing it twice for nothing. Give me a millstone, and I will sing it again." "Yes," he said, "if it belonged only to me, you should have it." "Yes," said the others, "if he sings again, he can have it." The bird then came down, and 20 millers took a beam and lifted the stone up. The bird stuck his neck through the hole and put the stone on it as if it were a collar, and then flew to the tree and sang. "My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I." Oh, excuse me. Once he finished singing, he spread his wings, and in his right claw he had the chain, and in his left one he had the shoes, and around his neck the millstone. He flew far away to his father's house. In the room, the father, the mother, and Marlene were sitting at the table. The father said, "I feel so contented and happy." "Not I," said the mother. "I feel uneasy, just as if a bad storm were coming." But Marlene just sat and cried and cried. And the bird flew up, and as it seated itself on the roof, and the father said, "Oh, I feel truly happy, and the sun is shining and so brightly outside. I feel as if I'm going to see some old acquaintance again." "Not I," said the woman. "I am so afraid my teeth are chattering, and I feel like I have fire in my veins." And she tore open her bodice even more. Marlene sat in a corner, crying, and she held a handkerchief before her eyes and cried until it was wet clear through. Then the bird seated itself on the juniper tree and sang. "My mother, she killed me." The mother plugged her ears and shut her eyes, not wanting to see or hear, but there was a roaring in her ears like the fiercest storm, and her eyes burned and flashed like lightning. "My father, he ate me." "Oh, mother," said the man, "that is a beautiful bird. He is singing so splendidly, and the sun is shining and so warm, and it smells like pure cinnamon." "My sister Marlene." Then Marlene laid her head on her knees and cried, but the man said, "I'm going out. I must see the bird up close." "Oh, don't go," pleaded the woman. "I feel as though the whole house were shaking and on fire." But the man went out and looked at the bird. "Gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I." Well, this bird dropped the golden chain, and it fell right around the man's neck so perfectly, like it was made for him. Then the man went in and said, "Just look what a beautiful bird. This is what a beautiful golden chain it has given me, and how nice it looks." But the woman was terrified. She fell down on the floor in the room. Her cap fell off her head. Her cap fell off her head. Then the bird sang once more, "My mother, she killed me." The woman screamed, "I wish I were 1,000 fathoms beneath the earth so I would not have to hear that." "My father, he ate me." Then the woman fell down as if she were dead. If only. "My sister Marlene." "Oh," said Marlene, "I too will go out and see if the bird will give me something." Then she went out. "Gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf." He threw the shoes down to her, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I. Then she was contented and happy. She put the red shoes on and danced and leaped into the house. "Oh, I was sad when I went out. Now I'm so happy. This is a splendid bird. He has given me a pair of red shoes." "No," said the woman, jumping to her feet with her hair standing up like fire, like flames of fire. "I feel as if the world were coming to an end. I too will go see see if it makes me feel better." Sorry about that, guys. Apparently my camera didn't really record the last part of it, so I'm just gonna, it's really short, so I'll just continue it. So let's see, where were we at? "And then she went out the door and crash. The bird threw the millstone on her head and crushed her to death. The father and Marlene heard the sound and went out. Smoke, flames, and fire were rising from the place when that was all over, the little brother was standing there, and he took his father and Marlene by the hand, and all three were very happy, and they went back into the house and sat down at the table and ate. Man, it was it was a lot to unpack there. So at least at the end, the stepmother got what she deserved, or what was coming to her. And I don't know about you, but like there were some aspects in the story that gave me like Cinderella vibes almost. Like the mother dying at childbirth and the stepmother only liking her child. And I don't know, I just thought it was kind of interesting. There was also a similar story to this one, and that was The Boy and the Wicked Stepmother. I won't read the entire story for this one just because it's literally a mixture of the two stories. It starts out kind of like Hansel and Gretel, where the family is in destitute and the stepmother wants to get rid of them. So she has the father take them out into the woods. This time though, it's actually the girl who grabs the stones to make a trail. The different part in this is when the kids come back home, the stepmother is so furious she doesn't know what to do with herself. So one day while the father was out, she took the little boy, killed him, and gave him to the sister to cut him up and make a dinner out of him. The girl doesn't know what to do, but she saves the heart and hides it in a tree outside of their house. The mother gets very angry and asks where the heart went, but she said a stray dog came by and took it. When the father comes home, they all eat dinner, and after the meal, the sister takes all the bones and also hides them in the tree. The next morning, a bird flies out, singing something very similar to that of the juniper story. The song scares the mother, and she throws a lump of salt at the bird, but he dodges it, and the lump of salt falls back on her and hits her in the head and kills her. It's kind of like a little bit of a mixture of the two stories, and I thought it was kind of interesting, so I wanted to share it. But that's really all I have on Hansel and Gretel. If you guys have any more to add, just go ahead and comment down below, and thank you so much for joining me. And as always, be good. If you can't be good, be safe. And if you can't be safe, be awesome. Bye.